Florida has always been more than just a state. It's an idea. Sunshine, beaches, palm trees, and that promise of a laid-back lifestyle where winter never comes. For decades, people from across the country dreamed of retiring here, buying a second home here, or just moving here to start fresh. And for a long time, the housing market delivered on that dream. Prices rose steadily, demand was constant, and owning property in Florida felt like holding a golden ticket. But every dream has a darker side, and in 2025, we're beginning to see it. Florida's housing market is buckling under pressures that no amount of sunshine can hide. Insurance premiums are exploding, doubling or tripling for many homeowners. Flood risks and hurricane damage are making lenders nervous. Interest rates are eating away at affordability, and buyers are finally hitting the brakes. What was once one of the hottest markets in America is cooling fast, and in some cities, it's not just cooling, it's collapsing. In this video, we're counting down the 10 Florida cities where home prices are most likely to plummet in 2025. We'll start with the markets that still look relatively stable but are showing cracks, and we'll build toward the #1 city where the crash could be the most severe. Stick with us, because the last city on this list isn't just vulnerable, it's already leading one of the sharpest downturns in the entire country. Number 10, Ocala. Our list begins in Ocala, a city best known for rolling green pastures and thoroughbred horses. Nicknamed the horse capital of the world, Ocala feels very different from Florida's flashy coastal cities. There are no skyscrapers or mega condos here, just a quieter pace of life that attracted families and retirees who wanted affordability without the chaos of Miami or Tampa. During the pandemic, Ocala saw steady growth. People moved inland to escape high prices on the coasts, and suddenly this small city was on the map. Home prices climbed, and for a while it looked like Ocala might follow the same boom path as Florida's bigger metros. But here in 2025, the momentum is fading. Prices still show a small gain compared to last year, around 5%, but look closer and you'll see warning signs. Inventory has been rising month after month. Homes that used to sell in a few weeks now sit for months. Sellers are offering concessions, covering closing costs, throwing in repairs, even lowering prices just to attract buyers. One thing that helps Ocala is its location. Being inland, it doesn't face the same hurricane and flood risks that coastal markets do. That makes it more resilient than many cities on this list. But resilience doesn't mean immunity. Rising mortgage rates and higher insurance premiums hit everyone in Florida, no matter where you live. And with demand slowing, Ocala is no longer the hidden gem it was just a few years ago. Ocala's economy is also narrower than larger metros, relying heavily on agriculture, equestrian tourism, and healthcare. Those industries provide stability, but don't drive the kind of wage growth needed to keep pace with inflated housing costs. For young families hoping to settle here, that mismatch means affordability is still an issue, even if prices aren't collapsing yet. For now, Ocala is the least vulnerable city on our countdown, which is why it sits at number 10. But the days of rapid growth are behind it, and the cracks are beginning to show. Number 9, Lakeland. Next up is Lakeland, a city perfectly positioned between Tampa and Orlando. For years, Lakeland's biggest selling point was location. You could buy a home here for less than half the price of one in Orlando, enjoy a quieter lifestyle, and still commute if you needed to. During the pandemic, that formula turned Lakeland into one of Florida's fastest growing housing markets. Prices soared as buyers flooded in, desperate for space and affordability. But booms don't last forever. By 2025, Lakeland's housing market has stalled. Prices are essentially flat, down a fraction of a percent compared to last year. But that flat line hides what's really happening. Inventory is up significantly, and homes are staying on the market longer. Sellers who used to spark bidding wars are now cutting prices just to get an offer. The problem is simple: affordability. Lakeland's economy is solid, but not high-paying. Many jobs are in logistics, warehousing, and healthcare, and wages didn't keep up with the rapid rise in home prices. With mortgage rates now above 7%, monthly payments on even a modest Lakeland home are out of reach for many local families. Another challenge is oversupply. Builders, seeing the surge in demand during the pandemic, rolled out new developments across Polk County. But now, with demand slowing, those new homes are hitting the market at at the worst possible time. Too many homes and not enough buyers is a recipe for falling prices. What complicates things further is that Lakeland's appeal as a middle ground is starting to backfire. Many families moved here to enjoy a quieter pace of life, but with Tampa and Orlando both cooling, the incentive to commute from Lakeland is weaker. Rising gas prices and longer travel times make the trade-off less attractive, leaving new buyers questioning whether the savings are really worth it. Lakeland isn't collapsing yet, but it's on shaky ground. What was once a go-to affordable alternative is now facing the same headwinds as bigger Florida cities, and without the same wage growth or job diversity to cushion the blow. Number 8. Jacksonville. At number 8, we move north to Jacksonville, Florida's largest city by land area and one of its fastest growing metros. For years, Jacksonville was considered a bargain compared to Miami or Orlando. Families came for the lower cost of living, investors bought aggressively, and home prices surged, up more than 40% during the pandemic alone. But in 2025, Jacksonville's market is losing steam. Prices are down a little over 2% compared to last year, which doesn't sound dramatic until you consider how quickly the shift has happened. Inventory is rising fast. Homes that once sold in a weekend now sit for months, and sellers are cutting prices sometimes multiple times to attract serious buyers. The risks here go beyond just affordability. Jacksonville is increasingly vulnerable to flooding, especially in neighborhoods near the St. Johns River and along the coast. Insurance premiums are climbing, and some homeowners are seeing annual costs jump by thousands of dollars. That makes owning a home more expensive even if the purchase price hasn't changed, and it's pushing buyers to the sidelines. Jacksonville does have a diversified economy, finance, healthcare, logistics, but wages are still well below what's needed to comfortably afford a home at today's prices and interest rates. That mismatch between incomes and housing costs is what makes the market vulnerable. And here's why Jacksonville matters so much. It's big. With nearly 1 million residents, this isn't a small town market correction. When Jacksonville slows, it sends ripples across the state. And in 2025, those ripples are turning into waves. Number 7. Port St. Lucie. Port St. Lucie is one of Florida's fastest growing cities, and for years it looked unstoppable. Tucked on the Treasure Coast between Orlando and Miami, it offered an attractive mix of suburban living, access to beaches, and affordability compared to the state's larger metros. Families moved in, retirees settled here, and developers scrambled to keep up with demand. But in 2025, the story is shifting. Prices are already down more than 1% compared to last year, and the bigger red flag is inventory. Listings have jumped by nearly 25%, flooding the market with homes at a time when buyers are growing scarce. Homes that once sold quickly are now lingering, and sellers are increasingly forced to cut prices just to compete. Part of the problem is timing. Port St. Lucie boomed during the pandemic when remote workers and retirees rushed to Florida in search of space and sunshine. Builders responded by adding massive amounts of new supply. But now, with mortgage rates above 7% and insurance premiums climbing, that supply looks more like a burden than a blessing. Local wages add another layer of vulnerability. Port St. Lucie's economy is anchored in healthcare, retail, and service jobs, which simply don't support the elevated home values left behind by the boom. The result is a widening gap between what locals can afford and what sellers are asking. And when affordability collapses, prices eventually follow. Port St. Lucie isn't crashing as hard as some coastal cities yet, but the warning signs are there. Rising supply, limited affordability, and dependence on retirees and out-of-state buyers make it especially fragile in 2025. Number 6. Fort Lauderdale. Fort Lauderdale, once branded the Venice of America for its scenic canals, is now facing a housing storm of its own. This city has long been a hotspot for luxury buyers, retirees, and tourists, with condos and waterfront homes driving much of its real estate market. But in 2025, Fort Lauderdale's housing market is struggling, and the challenges are mounting. Prices are down more than 7% compared to last year, making it one of the sharper declines in the state. Homes now sit on the market for over 100 days on average, a stark change from the frenzied sales of just a few years ago. Condominiums in particular are showing weakness, weighed down by new safety regulations and skyrocketing HOA fees following the Surfside condo collapse in 2021. But perhaps the biggest factor crushing Fort Lauderdale's housing market is insurance. Rising sea levels and stronger hurricanes are driving premiums to record highs. Some homeowners report annual costs jumping by thousands, and in some cases, insurers are refusing to renew policies altogether. That makes owning here far more expensive even if the sticker price on a home falls. Fort Lauderdale also leans heavily on international buyers and wealthy investors. When global financial conditions tighten, as they are now, those buyers retreat, leaving luxury condos and waterfront homes unsold. The city's glamorous image hides a fragile housing foundation, one that depends on constant inflows of wealth from outside. For locals, the correction is bittersweet. On one hand, falling prices could mean better opportunities to buy. On the other, the rising cost of ownership from insurance and fees means the dream of living in Fort Lauderdale may stay out of reach for many. Number 5. Tampa. Tampa has been one of Florida's biggest real estate success stories over the last decade. Its strong job market, cultural revival, and location on the Gulf Coast turned it into a magnet for both families and investors. During the pandemic, Tampa's housing market went into overdrive. Prices jumped by more than 40% in just 2 years, and bidding wars were the norm. But in 2025, the boom is cracking. Prices are down nearly 5% compared to last year, and the bigger issue is inventory. Homes for sale in Tampa are up more than 45% year over year, creating one of the most oversupplied markets in the state. Sellers who once turned down offers above asking are now desperate to attract any buyer. Affordability is at the heart of Tampa's troubles. Wages in the metro area didn't keep pace with soaring home values, and with mortgage rates above 7%, monthly payments are simply out of reach for many families. Investors who once bought aggressively in Tampa are retreating as profits dry up and short-term rental demand softens. The city also faces mounting risks from hurricanes and flooding, driving insurance premiums higher and adding to the total cost of ownership. For many buyers, the math just doesn't work anymore. The result, homes are sitting longer, sellers are cutting prices, and confidence in the market is slipping fast. Tampa's decline is significant because of its size. This isn't a small city correction, it's a major metro showing stress across the board. And when large markets like Tampa falter, the ripple effects are felt across the entire state. Number 4. Sarasota. For years, Sarasota was the jewel of Florida's Gulf Coast. With its white sand beaches, cultural scene, and reputation as a retiree haven, it attracted a steady flow of buyers from across the US and abroad. Downtown condos, luxury waterfront homes, and quiet suburban neighborhoods all surged in demand, especially during the pandemic. Prices soared, and for a time it felt like Sarasota could defy gravity. But in 2025, reality is setting in. Home prices in Sarasota are down more than 4% compared to last year, and homes are sitting on the market for far longer, sometimes 80 to 120 days. Inventory in Sarasota and neighboring Manatee County has been swelling, creating more competition among sellers and dragging down prices. What makes Sarasota particularly vulnerable is its dependence on retirees and second home buyers. When the market is hot, that demand fuels explosive growth. But when interest rates climb and stock markets wobble, those same buyers retreat, leaving behind too many homes and not enough demand. In Sarasota, that's exactly what we're seeing now. Condo owners are especially under pressure. New safety regulations, skyrocketing HOA fees, and rising insurance premiums are turning once desirable properties into financial headaches. Owners who counted on steady appreciation are suddenly stuck with monthly costs they can't manage and resale values dropping by the month. And then there's the climate risk. Sarasota's waterfront beauty comes at a cost. Hurricane threats, flood zones, and saltwater intrusion all drive insurance higher and scare off cautious buyers. For many families, Sarasota's charm no longer outweighs the financial risks. What was once a luxury market built on outside wealth is now buckling under its own weight. Sarasota isn't collapsing overnight, but the foundations are clearly cracking. Number 3. St. Petersburg. Cross the bay from Tampa and you'll find St. Petersburg, another city once celebrated for its revival. Known for its waterfront parks, art scene, and growing job market, St. Pete became one of Florida's fastest rising real estate stars. Downtown condos filled with professionals, retirees, and investors, while suburban neighborhoods saw bidding wars that pushed prices higher year after year. But in 2025, St. Petersburg's market is faltering. Prices have fallen more than 7% compared to last year, one of the steepest drops in the state. Even more alarming, more than 70% of recent sales have closed below the original listing price. Sellers are chasing the market down, and buyers are holding out, waiting for deeper discounts. The condo market here is especially shaky. Like Fort Lauderdale and Miami, St. Pete is being hit hard by higher insurance premiums, stricter safety regulations, and ballooning HOA fees. What was once an attractive option for snowbirds and investors has turned into a tough sell. For some owners, monthly carrying costs have doubled or even tripled while their home values sink. St. Petersburg also suffers from the same affordability crisis as its neighbors. Wages lag far behind housing costs, leaving locals unable to keep the market afloat. During the pandemic, outside buyers and investors drove much of the boom, but now those outsiders have pulled back, leaving a vacuum in demand. The city's size makes this downturn more significant. St. Petersburg is part of the larger Tampa Bay metro, which means its struggles amplify Tampa's overall correction. Together, they represent one of the largest regional housing declines in the state. St. Pete still has its charm, sunsets on the pier, a lively arts district, and a vibrant downtown. But charm won't pay the bills, and for homeowners underwater on their mortgages, the city's beauty feels like cold comfort. Number 2, Fort Myers. Few Florida cities tell the story of boom and bust as clearly as Fort Myers. Just a few years ago, Fort Myers was one of the fastest growing housing markets in the entire country. Home prices doubled between 2019 and 2022, fueled by retirees, out-of-state buyers, and a frenzy of investor activity. For a while, it seemed unstoppable. But in 2025, Fort Myers is falling apart. Home prices are down more than 12% year over year, one of the sharpest declines in Florida. Homes are sitting on the market for months, and sellers are cutting prices by tens of thousands of dollars just to get attention. Part of the problem is oversupply. Builders added thousands of new homes during the boom, confident that demand would never slow. Now, those same homes are hitting a saturated market with too few buyers to absorb them. Investors who bought at the peak are scrambling to sell, flooding the market with even more inventory. Insurance is another crushing burden. After Hurricane Ian in 2022 devastated parts of the region, insurance premiums skyrocketed. Some homeowners saw their annual costs double or triple, wiping out the savings that originally made Fort Myers attractive. For retirees on fixed incomes, those costs are unsustainable. The result is a market in freefall. Fort Myers still offers sunshine and beaches, but for homeowners, that comes with enormous financial risk. Equity is evaporating, affordability is collapsing, and the dream of coastal Florida living is turning into a nightmare. Fort Myers is only number 2 on our list because there's one city that's even more vulnerable. But make no mistake, the Fort Myers housing market is already in serious decline, and the worst may still be ahead. Number 1, Cape Coral. And now we arrive at the city most at risk in Florida's housing market, Cape Coral. Known as the waterfront wonderland with its sprawling network of canals, Cape Coral was once marketed as paradise on earth. Waterfront homes, boating culture, and affordable prices made it irresistible to retirees, snowbirds, and investors alike. During the pandemic boom, prices skyrocketed, nearly doubling in just a few years. For a while, it looked like Cape Coral could do no wrong. But in 2025, the bottom is falling out. Cape Coral isn't just vulnerable, it's already collapsing. Home values here have dropped in 12 of the last 13 months, and nearly half of all listings have been forced to slash asking prices. In some neighborhoods, homes are selling for tens of thousands less than they did only a year ago. And with more than 8% of local mortgages already underwater, thousands of homeowners now owe more than their homes are worth. Why is Cape Coral crashing so hard? It comes down to a perfect storm of risk factors. First, oversupply. Builders rushed to capitalize on the pandemic boom, flooding the market with new homes. Now, with demand slowing, that oversupply is dragging prices down even further. Second, insurance. Cape Coral sits directly in one of the highest risk hurricane zones in the entire country. After Hurricane Ian devastated the region in 2022, insurance premiums skyrocketed. Some homeowners now face annual bills in the 5-figure range just to keep coverage. For many families, those costs are simply unsustainable, and they're being forced to sell, sell or walk away from their homes altogether. Third, affordability. Cape Coral's economy is heavily reliant on service sector jobs, which never kept pace with the meteoric rise in housing costs. When mortgage rates jumped above 7%, the math stopped working. Locals can't afford to buy, out-of-state demand has cooled, and investors are retreating. What's left is a market with too many homes, too few buyers, and prices in freefall. Cape Coral's story is more than just numbers. It's a warning. Streets once filled with for sale signs in 2008 are showing them again in 2025. Families who thought they had found their dream home are watching equity evaporate, while new buyers hesitate, waiting for prices to fall further. The same sunshine and canals that made Cape Coral so attractive have now become part of its downfall, as the cost of living and climate risk outweigh the dream. Cape Coral isn't just Florida's most vulnerable market, it may be one of the most vulnerable in the entire United States. And for anyone watching the housing market closely, this city is ground zero for the crash of 2025. Florida is still paradise in many ways, but when it comes to housing, the risks are real and the correction is here. Thanks for watching and stay tuned for upcoming videos.